Okay, so hello, everyone. On behalf of our team here, I'd like to welcome you all to the International Primatology Lecture Series, Past, Present, and Future Perspectives from the Field. I'm Andrew McIntosh of Kyoto University's Wildlife Research Center, and this lecture is part of CICASP Seminar in Science Communication, run by our Center for International Collaboration and Advanced Studies in Primatology at Kyoto University Center for the Evolutionary Origins of Human Behavior. And through this initiative, we're trying to capture some origin stories from different primatologists about their stellar careers, or just their big ideas that they've had, or generally to see what they've been up to all these years and find out what we can learn about them as we all progress at different stages of our own careers. So this is the 23rd lecture in our series, and I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Paula Pebsworth here to join us. Paula and I were grad students here at Kyoto University's Primate Research Institute in Mike's lab, actually, many years ago. And I have nothing but the warmest memories of that time together. So super happy to hear what Paula's been up to since then. But like always, I'll first pass it over to Mike Huffman for the introductions.
Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, Paula. It's always nice to see you. We're often chatting on Zoom these days, from different parts of the world as we travel around and do things. It's been a great many years. Lots of fun work we've collaborated on together in quite a lot of different places. I've got to go to South Africa for the first time to visit Paula and her family when she was doing her PhD work down there. But we actually started back way before that in Colorado. We both have roots in Colorado, spent time there. I was born there, and Paula spent a lot of time there. So we've kind of met in different parts of the world for different scientific and just fun events. So I'm really happy that Paula can join us in this series. I can only say it's about time with the 23rd. You could have been on this much earlier, but I think traveling and different things came in and out of the plans. But anyway, I'm very happy to introduce you to the world, to CICASP, all the people around this planet who will be listening in today and learning from your stories and the work that you've done. Paula, before I go on too long, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to, oh wait. No. All right. You'll see my screen.
There you go.
All right. So you can see
I'll see on the other side.
Yes. I'm gonna diminish this so I can see. All right. So you can see the title of my talk is "You Never Know Where Life Will Take You: An Interdisciplinary and Unconventional Path." All right, where I'm going to advance my slides. Okay. So first, I want to thank the organizers for the invitation, in particular Mike Huffman, who I asked in the mid-1990s if he could use a good field assistant. A good deal of time has passed, and on the left, he's holding my oldest, who is now 24. On the right, he came to South Africa, as he mentioned, and is no doubt offering up a joke or a pun. We worked together in Uganda and South Africa. Mike served as my advisor when I was working on my doctorate at Kyoto University's Primate Research Institute. And while in Japan, most days would begin with coffee and conversation with him. My dad is on the top right. He loved wildlife, and he shared his love with me, I'm the little one below him, through National Geographic magazines. Several issues were always lying around, and I recall this particular issue with Jane Goodall on the cover and thinking to myself, man, I'd like to do that. I didn't know anyone who studied wildlife, let alone primates, so I tucked that idea away. This is a map showing areas of the world that have been important to me. I'm from the US and received my bachelor's from the University of Iowa, which is in the star in the middle. And afterwards, I moved to California, that's on the West Coast, and then moved to upstate New York, where I received my master's from the State University of New York. My talk will discuss skills and abilities that I acquired when I was younger, and then later used in my doctorate, postdoctorate, and independent research. Because I've worked in several countries, I'll also discuss quality of life, which affects one's ability to do good research, and that country's willingness or ability to coexist with primates. After receiving my bachelor's degree in biology, I moved to California. There, I took a few classes in enology, which is the study of winemaking. Later, I worked as a wine chemist at 2 wineries in Napa Valley and another one in Australia. I spent my days testing sugar and alcohol content in wine, tough job, moving wine around, power washing stainless steel tanks, and working 15-plus-hour days during harvest. This taught me about the struggles of farmers, the science behind crop production, and the hard work required to produce an agricultural product. I liked winemaking, but I longed to do something more related to wildlife, so I took a position conducting environmental impact assessments for plants, be they rare and endangered or alien invasive, and animals. We used a variety of tools like quadrats and Sherman live traps. I also worked on a project that looked at roosting preferences in bats. I learned how to use mist nets, attach small transmitters to bats, and follow them using radio telemetry. I went back to get my master's, and because of my chemistry background, I worked on a project that looked at heavy metals in soil. For over 60 years, farmers applied the pesticide lead arsenate to protect apples from what was once called gypsy moths. Later, the trees were removed and housing developments were planned. My research sought to answer the question, where did the lead and arsenic go? Were these safe places to live? Here I learned how to collect and process soil samples and how to use several analytical instruments like atomic absorption spectroscopy and inductively coupled plasma. I was careful to collect soil samples around the apple tree and realized that the concentrations were highest along the drip line. Soil samples were taken at 3 depths so I could see that lead concentrations were highest at the surface where they were bound up by organic matter. The arsenic, on the other hand, was traveling and was highest at lower soil levels. I enjoy lab work, but I didn't want to do only lab work. My husband's job took us to Italy, and while there, I had the time to ponder, what did I want to do next? I kept thinking about primatology, and I had read about Pat Wright's work in Madagascar. I decided to write her and ask if I could volunteer my time. To my surprise, she said yes. I spent a few months at Ranamafana following golden bamboo lemurs and documented their movements and feeding behavior. This was many years ago. We slept in tents, bathed in rivers, and had no running water or electricity. Communicating with the outside world wasn't easy, and the food was basic. I managed to pick up Giardia, and others came down with dysentery and hepatitis. It was here that I began thinking about coexisting with wildlife. Madagascar is home to 15 genera of living lemurs, and you can see the map that's on your left. And as of 2023, there were more than 30 million people living on the island of Madagascar. How will the needs of both people and lemurs be met on an island? At this year's IPS meeting in Malaysia, I learned about some amazing initiatives that are designed to help people, which in turn helps lemurs. And in this program, people can earn conservation credits. So they get credits for working in a nursery, credits for planting trees, and those credits can in turn be used to buy things like bicycles and sewing machines and improve the quality of their life. Oops, I'm going to go back. Bamboo lemurs eat a diet high in cyanide, and I was talking with another researcher about diet and health. He recommended that I reach out to Mike Huffman as he was studying self-medication in chimpanzees. I remain grateful to Pat, and am glad that I had the courage to write her, as in a letter. This was pre-email. The next International Primatological Society Congress will be held in Madagascar in 2025. I hope you have the opportunity to visit this amazing country and that you'll also write to people you admire and ask about potential opportunities at their site. So I wrote Mike Huffman, and he told me that he had a new site in Uganda, and if I could get funding, I could work with him in Budongo. I applied for and received a Fulbright scholarship and came to Uganda in 1998. We looked at fecal parasites, diet, geophagy, and behavior. I had the pleasure of working with Joseph, Jacob, and Gusham, several of their amazing field assistants. I grew to greatly appreciate Gusham's encyclopedic knowledge of chimpanzees. He's the one at the bottom right. And with Sarah Young, I also investigated soil eaten by pregnant women and what properties soil possesses. In many places in Africa, you can see this picture that's in the bottom. You can find pregnancy clays at the markets. And so we were interested in learning more about pregnancy clays and about the people that use them. Using camera traps, I looked for more information on chimpanzee geophagy. At this particular site, when the soil is soft and moist, the chimpanzees dip their fingers into the soil and lick it off. They also suction up clay-infused water. They create and use leaf sponges to collect clay-infused water and break off chunks of soil and either eat it there or take it to go. I believe age class and reproductive status is important, so we documented who came to the geophagy sites. As you can see, adult females and juveniles spend the most time eating soil. Interestingly, this is the same patterns that we see in humans. Using analytical equipment, I tested the soils to determine particle size, which is the percentage of sand, silt, and clay. We also looked at the type of clay as well as various minerals. There is a huge difference in the amount of sand present in these soils. I don't know about you, but if you've ever eaten any soil, but 86% sand must feel really terrible in the mouth. We also conducted tests to determine whether these soils could adsorb plant secondary metabolites like phenolics. Here you can see that soil from Waibira, the bar on the far left, does much better job than soil from the other two geophagy sites on the reserve. And it's almost on par with pharmaceutical grade montmorillonite when it comes to adsorbing phenolics. We also looked at bioavailability of iron, a soil analysis that uses a digestion, which mimics intestinal biochemistry. Here we had an interesting result. The soil that could adsorb phenolics had very little bioavailable iron. However, 3 other soils had a surprising amount of bioavailable iron. These 3 geophagy sites are at the base of trees, and we suspect that tree exudes phytochemicals that enhance iron bioavailability, or that iron was more exchangeable at these sites. I wanted to know, when given a choice, which soil would chimps pick? Would they pick the soil that's high in clay or the soil that's high in iron? So to answer this question, we designed a field experiment. We created experimental stumps and placed these 2 kinds of soil inside. We monitored the experiments with camera traps. The experiment was designed for chimps, but you can see from the title that chimps weren't the test subjects. When you begin an experiment in the wild, you have no control over who participates. It didn't take a group of black and white colobus long to find the experiment. We had placed approximately 5 kilograms of the 2 different types of soil in each stump. When I returned, the soil high in clay was completely empty and the other untouched. I added an additional 5 kilograms of soil. The next day, it was empty again. In short, they consumed 9.67 kilograms of soil high in clay in 4.33 hours. In the camera trap videos, we can see aggression. Some individuals had less access. Younger ones were pushed away, excluded, or chased. Who would have thought that there would be so much competition for soil? While in Uganda, I always also had the opportunity to teach field assistants how to test water quality. I also visited the local schools and markets to better understand life in this part of the world and met with farmers to learn about various strategies that had been implemented to reduce crop foraging. Coexisting with wildlife in Uganda is a struggle. Animals leave the forest and forage on crops, in particular corn, cassava, beans, sugarcane, and mangoes. On the other hand, people enter the forest and set snares for bushmeat. For the most part, people are tolerant of chimpanzees, but they are not tolerant of baboons. Tolerance is shaped by many factors. How much we like an animal is an important one. Several strategies have been trialed to reduce conflict: guarding, early warning detection, plant barriers, trenches, lights, nets, live traps to capture damage-causing animals, and several types of simple fences. While not the target of snares, at one time, almost 15% of the chimpanzees had a snare injury. To decrease snare use inside the forest, goats and vet care were provided to people that agreed to stop setting snares. As I understand, despite these strategies, the struggles continue. Budongo is a wonderful field station. Each researcher has their own room, and a 55-gallon drum filled with water is warmed, making for a much appreciated shower at the end of the day. Meals are basic. Communication has vastly improved. When I first came to Budongo, I would send Mike a fax asking various questions and giving him updates. 2 weeks later, I would receive his reply. As of late, you can get email in camp and even Skype. Malaria is still a thing, so come with malaria prophylaxis. In 1999, I became a mother, and 3 years later had a second child. Being a mom taught me a tremendous amount about development and behavior. I like to think that it's made me a more observant and a better researcher. As well, I can't help but give out mothering advice, so there's a bit of that in this talk as well. I thought about site considerations before having children, but they become more important once I considered bringing my family to the field. Quality of life is it helps shape the quality of your research. Here are a few things young researchers might consider when choosing a site. Think about the field station infrastructure, diseases that are present, access to clean drinking water, access to health care, food, transportation, political stability, and crime. When my children were 6 and 9, I saw an ad on PIN, which is the Primate Information Network, for a research coordinator in South Africa at a private nature reserve. My husband was just retiring, and so I applied. The reserve was owned by the late Dr. Ian Giddy and his wife, Jenny. During my interview, I asked if my family could come as well, and their answer was something like, "Why not?" We sold our house, put our belongings in storage, and we moved to the Western Cape. The reserve was home to chacma baboons, and people warned me that I might not find them so interesting after studying chimpanzees. On the contrary, I found them to be fascinating. The reserve sits on top of a huge clay deposit. I soon learned that where road cuts had been made exposing clay, the baboons ate it. Ian wanted to put a GPS collar on one of the baboons, so in addition to learning about geophagy, diet, and parasites, I also learned about trapping, sedating, collaring, and spatial analyses. I used these data for my doctoral dissertation at PRI. Using camera traps, I monitored who came to the geophagy sites and how long they stayed. I found the same trend as I did in Uganda. Adult females and juveniles spent the most time eating soil. Because baboons have an external marker of pregnancy, I could also look at reproductive state. The pregnant females spent more time at the geophagy sites than any other baboon, but the number wasn't significantly more. Of all the geophagy questions I had, this one still vexes me. The soil that the baboons prefer to eat is white. but there is also lots of pink soil, which should be high in iron. With Sarah Young, we tested the soil for bioavailability of iron. Here in this graph, you can see the solid line. This is for, go back, total iron. And so for total iron, this is the really strong digestion. The pink soil is high in total iron, but then when we tested for bioavailable iron, neither the white nor the pink soil had much iron to offer. Again, we looked at whether the soil was able to adsorb or detoxify plant secondary compounds in the soil. They can, but it's nothing like what we found in Uganda. Interestingly, the non-preferred soil was better at detoxification. It's higher in kaolinite and iron oxides, which can adsorb toxins. I like to think of soil as a multivitamin that's eaten for different reasons by different individuals at different times in their lives. I analyzed thousands or hundreds of fecal samples to determine whether parasites play a role in geophagy. To my surprise, every single sample contained the parasite Tricharis. Mike and I discussed parasite transmission, and he suggested that maybe the baboons were picking it up at the geophagy sites. I objected, saying that I did not see feces around the geophagy sites. Once I looked carefully, I found images of baboons with their most likely dirty hands and feet on the surfaces frequently eaten by the baboons. With colleagues at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Chris Appleton and Colleen Archer, we tested whether there were parasites on the soil surface. To my horror, there was. I say horror because I had tasted the soil, and so had my son. The results weren't as bad as I initially thought. We did find parasites, but most didn't contain larvae, which were capable of infection. In the slide that's on the right, only B is infected. Nonetheless, the baboons eat acacia seeds off the forest floor, and the soil contained lots of Tricharis. With Mike Huffman, Joanna Lambert, and Sarah Young, we published an updated geophagy review. We identified 287 accounts of geophagy among 136 species, adding 79 primate species to the list of those considered in prior reviews. And I'm certain that the number will continue to grow. While in South Africa, I also learned a tremendous amount about alien invasive species and their eradication. In the early 1900s, people brought several types of acacia trees from Australia for wood fuel and for tannins, which are used for tanning leather. In a few decades, these acacias were outcompeting native plants and using a tremendous amount of water. Acacia marenzi, found on the reserve, is considered one of the 100 worst alien invasive plants worldwide. In an effort to protect the amazing plants that are part of the Cape Floristic Kingdom, the government began a project to eradicate several alien invasive species. Interestingly, Acacia marenzi also made up 39% of the baboon's diet, and this important food resource was being removed. I also learned about baboon shenanigans. Baboons were constantly trying to get into the cars, houses, and they loved taking things like my son's rubber boots and chewing the nail caps off the roof, which later caused the roof to leak. I also had the pleasure of working with 6 field assistants. I learned about baboon sanctuaries and why there was a need for them. Near the end of my study, I began noticing that the baboons were moving further and further away from the reserve and not using their usual sleeping sites. I was grateful for the VHF part of the collar as we were struggling to find this huge troop of 115. One day we tracked them to an area really far from the reserve. They had found a huge stand of pristine Acacia marenzi and heavily foraging here. Because it was far from a rocky outcrop, they began to sleep in these trees. This is highly unusual for Chacma baboons. Once the collar came off, I began exploring their movements. I wanted to look at their home range and how it had changed over time. This sent me down a rabbit hole, so many ways to estimate home range. I'm glad that I have an understanding of GIS and encourage all students to have some basic GIS skills. What about human-wildlife conflict in South Africa? Baboons, porcupines, jackals, leopards, otters, and other animals are in conflict with people. My neighbor was a dairy farmer, and he took the time to explain how it was to live and work with baboons. Baboons eat crops that he'd planted for his cattle. They ate pelletized cattle food, and they entered his milking parlor looking for food when the cows were being milked. He had tried many techniques to move them off his property. Scarecrows and propane cannons were just a few. In the Western Cape, Cape Nature, the governing body, allows farmers to shoot animals that they deem are problematic. One unfortunate consequence is that when a mother with an infant is shot, if the infant doesn't die, people don't have the heart to kill the infant, and the infant may end up at a baboon sanctuary. There was one sanctuary close by, and I had the pleasure of getting to know people whose life work was caring and advocating for baboons and other wildlife. People sometimes think that if you study primates, the only avenue is academics, but that's not true. In addition to academia, you could also work in biomedical research, in a captive setting like zoos and/or sanctuaries. While in South Africa, I learned that research was easier when you have potable water, no malaria, and access to good health care and a comfortable bed. South Africa struggles to meet their electricity needs and with crime. Nonetheless, it is a gorgeous country. My family and I left South Africa and headed for Japan. Here I worked with Mike Huffman and his then student Andrew McIntosh, who was just wrapping up his doctorate. Andrew was tremendously helpful. He taught me how to analyze fecal parasites, use R, and was a friend to my son who also played guitar. While at PRI, I also had the opportunity to learn about different primate research-related projects. And it was really fun. Chris Martin was at PRI at the same time, and I got to go into his lab and see how he conducted his experiments with the chimpanzees for theory of mind. We loved living in Japan as it is safe, has dependable public transportation, excellent health care, clean drinking water, tasty food, and Ghibli studio. While here, Abigail, my oldest, attended school. It was a wonderful opportunity to learn about Japanese education and culture. Regarding human-wildlife conflict, Japan has invested a lot of time and effort to coexist with wildlife, but it remains a challenge. In addition to monkeys, bears, deer, and wild boar are a few animals that are in conflict with people. In the 1950s, Japan opened monkey parks as a strategy to reduce human-macaque conflict. At one time, there were more than 30 monkey parks, but as of 2018, only 10 remain. Much effort has been made to create affordable electric fences, habitat modification, and even robotics. I love the idea of this wolf-like robot that can scare off animals from entering crop fields. Next, I had the chance to do a postdoctorate in India with Professor Sindhu Radhakrishna. With 3 wonderful students, we trialed physical, auditory, chemical, and psychological deterrence. Some techniques were far more effective than others. We learned about people's perceptions of monkeys and conducted field trials in northern India to reduce crop foraging. We tried 4 kinds of physical deterrence. On the far left, you can see it's a jute rope that's coated with engine waste oil and covered in chili powder. And in the middle is a sari fence. This is predominantly used in southern India. It's just sari sewn together. And then on the far right, this is green garden netting. We initially just used it by itself. And then when the monkeys started to climb up the post, we attached thorny branches. And we also had a neighbor that had a brick wall, and that was the 4th one. we trialed 3 different kinds of auditory deterrence. This is called in the South local gun, and it's basically made out of PVC pipe. The little barrel comes off and you spray deodorant or body spray into the chamber, put in paper, put the barrel back on and stones, and then you can see the little igniter at the far end, and it makes a huge noise. But like all other auditory deterrents, they need to be used sparingly because monkeys habituate to them very quickly. We also tried bioacoustics, and they were an absolute bust. But I think that these animals are very used to human noises. And the last one was an ultrasonic device. And I want to just talk a little bit about that. Why we decided to try it was I had heard about a professor at the University of Chandigarh, which is also in northern India, and the rhesus macaques were getting into the dormitories and also into the pharmacy. And so what he tried was ultrasound, and it absolutely worked. But unfortunately, it gave the students headaches and the staff headaches. And so he had to discontinue using it. To me, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to try it in a rural area where people weren't around. We also tried repellents, and we tried several of them, like neem oil, again, the engine waste oil and chili powder. And here, Rupesh is making a deterrent made of rotting eggs and lemons. And it was so incredibly foul. We spread it at the front of our crops, and the monkeys, could not have cared less. We'd also read that you can take dung and put chilies in them and dry them. They call them dung briquettes, and then burn them when wildlife is around. And it's supposed to be irritating, and the smoke will move them off. It is incredibly irritating to the eyes. We didn't have any, the wildlife didn't seem to notice, but it absolutely bothered the 2 students I worked with. We also tried 2 types of psychological deterrents, drones and mirrors. I had read that drones were effective against elephants, so we tried them on rhesus macaques, and they actually seemed to work. I was only able to bring a really lightweight drone, but I would love if somebody tried it with a heavier duty drone, just to see how effective it is in other parts of the world. And the other thing I had heard about was that monkeys don't recognize themselves in mirrors, and it can be used mirrors can be used to discourage animals from entering an area. We tried placing mirrors on top of walls that the monkeys moved along and at the edge of the cornfields. And this is a little video that I captured. So what we observed was like what I've heard other animals do when given a mirror. Wait for it. They like to look at parts of their body that are not easily observed. So this was not the response I was expecting, but it's really interesting nonetheless. Sindhu and I wrote 2 papers based on the responses of close to 800 people. We found that choice of mitigation strategy was related to religion, education, and conflict history, but surprisingly, not occupation. A small percentage of respondents recommended monkey culling as a mitigation strategy, but the majority preferred that government authorities use translocation or sterilization as a mitigation measure. In a second paper, we tried to determine what determines people's willingness to share space with monkeys. We suggest that tangible costs, i.e. financial losses from primate depredation, primarily drive people's stated tolerance for primate presence. Intangible benefits from primates, like their ecological existence, sentience, and religious values, also critically affect attitudes towards existence. When looking at costs and benefits of shared space with monkeys, it's not surprising that the more often monkeys visit, the more likely they are to damage crops, damage property, and take food. We also found that 80% of people found that monkeys had a right to exist. Religious value was less than expected. The last strategy I want to discuss is conditioned taste aversion. And before I begin, I want to thank Dr. Deborah Forthman-Quick for helping me a tremendous amount to better understand kind of this complicated phenomenon. Conditioned taste aversion is a powerful and lasting form of learning that converts a highly preferred food taste into a disgusting stimulus. Some form of gastrointestinal illness is associated with the taste of food. An aversion is created when the offensive food is avoided after recovery from illness. Conditioned taste aversions can be created artificially using drugs that have a side effect of extreme nausea. These compounds must be undetectable. They must be tasteless and odorless. It doesn't matter what the food item looks like, only what it tastes like. It doesn't matter where the treated food item is placed, only that the entire dose is consumed. Homogeneous foods are ideal, and only try to establish one food aversion at a time. There are three main types of aversions. A weak aversion, animals, they still eat this preferred food, but they eat it in a slow manner. They might sniff it, manipulate it, rub, stare at, eating with retracted lips. A moderate, animals take more than 15 minutes to eat a preferred food. And a strong aversion is when animals refuse to eat a preferred food and may even show some uneasiness while near the food. So we had the opportunity to do some captive studies at a sterilization center before the rhesus macaques were sterilized. And how that the experiment would go is we would identify a food and the drug that we wanted to use, and the dosage is based on their weight. We would offer a treated bait on one day, and then the following day, we would offer them again a treated bait. And if the bait was eaten, we knew that no CTA had been created. If the bait was refused the following day, we offered an untreated bait. And then again, we could see what strength of aversion did we create. If it was weak, we knew they would eat it right away, but they would eat it in a kind of a disgusted manner. If they ate it after 15 minutes, it was moderate. And if the bait was never eaten, we knew we'd gotten a strong CTA. So here I want to just show you a short video. So this is the day that we're offering we'll turn my sound down a little bit. We're offering an untreated banana. So there's no compound on this. And you can see he's smelling it, thinking about it, sets it down, even gives it a little pat, and then he turns his body away from it. So in my book, that is a strong aversion. Our findings were published in this paper. 2 of the 4 drugs could create a conditioned taste aversion, estradiol and thiabendazole. The best drug was estradiol. Thiabendazole required a lot more compound and it was harder to conceal. The best candidates to work with were juveniles. Despite the fact that it's complicated, I think this strategy holds a lot of promise. The effects can be lasting. No equipment is required after the fact. It doesn't require human vigilance, and to avoid that food item is self-imposed. So toward the end of our project, our corn was looking absolutely amazing. And then the wind came. And then the pests came. First, it was some sort of a soil nematode, and then something else that ate the corn, and then the monkeys came, and every day they were starting to eat the corn. And again, I have a renewed appreciation for the challenge of farming. I loved my year in India and had the privilege of learning about their culture, religion, traditions, and human primate conflict. I love their food, World Heritage sites, and while slower and less dependable than Japan's, made my way around India using public transportation. Regarding human primate conflict, India is home to 14 species of non-human primates. We asked people how they felt about rhesus macaques, Hanuman langurs, bonnet macaques, and lion-tailed macaques. Rhesus were the most disliked, having the highest costs and the lowest benefits. I believe how fond we are of a species, again, it shapes our willingness to live with them. But to be clear, of the 4 monkeys, rhesus macaques are the most challenging. They will take valuable items like your wallet, glasses, and smartphone, and then barter with you for their return. People complain about monkeys, but approximately 50% of farmers don't even try to reduce crop foraging with the simplest of strategies. The G20 summit was recently held in Delhi. To discourage rhesus macaques from entering the summit, cardboard cutouts of Hanuman langurs were placed around the building. I don't know if they were successful, but I admire their creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. Most recently, I had the opportunity to work as a consultant in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Ahmed Al-Boug, pictured on the left, is their best-known primatologist, and I had the pleasure of working with him on a Hamadryas baboon project. He worked on a previous study in the late 1980s that estimated population, distribution, and density. He also interviewed people to understand their interactions with baboons. The 2022 study, which I coordinated, collected comparable data so the results could be compared. In addition to population estimation, we also looked at variation in spatial ecology between urban and wild populations. I put my collaring skills to good use as we collared 10 baboons to better understand their spatial ecology. Saudi has introduced laws and fines to reduce provisioning of human food waste, which has drawn baboons into their cities. With other experts, we recommended additional strategies to reduce conflict, to include sterilization. I once thought that Saudi Arabia was flat and had lots of sand and camels. While that is true in some parts of the country, it's also incredibly steep. When thinking about gathering data, topography and climate must be considered. Saudi has no crime and little public transportation, but lots of flights from one side of the country to the other. I am grateful for having had the opportunity to work with Al-Boug. So this is where I come full circle. As I told you, when I was younger, I studied enology, which is winemaking, botany, chemistry, spatial ecology, ethology, and pedology, which is soil science. I had no idea that studying soil for my master's would be helpful to my doctorate, but it absolutely was. Nor did I realize that working as a wine chemist would give me insight during my postdoc and be helpful to potential consulting work. Here you can see how I use knowledge from various subjects for my doctorate, postdoctorate, and current independent research. You might wonder if I should have been more focused. I am glad that I wasn't. There's a podcast I really love called Ologies with Ali Ward. She interviewed Dr. Lee Burke, who studies the science of laughter. He had the following to say: don't ever think you're so diverse that it doesn't pay off. It certainly does, because you get to see and think from different perspectives. I started with degrees in psychology and sociology and on, and then I stumbled into psychoneuroimmunology. I realized how everything was intertwined, interwoven, and interrelated. To Dr. Burke, I would say that I wholeheartedly agree. I think that having a diverse background has been an advantage and has allowed me to conduct research in many parts of the world on a variety of topics. And now some final mom thoughts, advice. to young people out there. Choose your site carefully. I kind of talked about the pros and cons of the different sites I've been at. And I also recommend that you choose your collaborators carefully. Get out of your comfort zone and learn new skills and abilities when opportunities present themselves. You won't regret the things you did, but will regret the things you didn't have the courage to try. Human-wildlife conflict will continue to increase and requires creative solutions. And just I want to thank a few people who have helped me along my way. While primatologists have absolutely shaped my path, it has been greatly influenced by people outside of it. Dr. Herb Brunkhorst was my high school biology teacher who gave me a love of learning and of biology. Dr. Jenny Giddy, I mentioned, helped me come to South Africa and then to Costa Rica. Dr. Eugene Spaziani was my parasitology professor at the University of Iowa, who I learned a tremendous amount from. Bob Pakoda was the first winery that I worked at. He taught me a lot about growing things and the science of taste. Dr. Fred Provenza, I met at the at Utah State University, and has just been an amazing friend to me over the years, and is someone who really sees the big picture. And Dr. Sarah Young, who taught me a lot about methodology and about the study of soil. And thank you very much. And I will stop sharing.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Paula.
Yeah, that's really fun. Nice to see all of that together. And, you definitely, from what I know of you, you definitely come out in all of that talk. So thanks for sharing. So I'd like to open it up to any questions we might have from the audience here in Zoom, or if there's anything in YouTube as well, we can get into that. And maybe one thing while we're waiting for questions to appear with hands or things in the chat, I want to ask you, you mentioned it was kind of a running theme that you're also a mom in this work and life that you've kind of crafted for yourself. But I wonder if you can share a little bit about the decisions that you made to get all of your family on board for, especially in the coming to Japan, for example, and before that going to South Africa as a unit. I know your husband Keith's retirement was a big part of that, but it's also not very common, I think, for everyone in the family to go around and do this within primatology. So I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit more.
I adore my kids. And it's just like you have this, sometimes you want it all in life, where I wanted to have the opportunity to go back and study primates. And I also wanted to do it with my kids. And I think by picking a country like South Africa, where, I said that clean drinking water, access to healthcare, no malaria, all of those things, I thought it would be a perfect opportunity. The only kind of struggle, I'll say, was that we were pretty remote. And so there was really no possibility of them attending school. And I am really grateful that my husband was an English teacher and has a teaching credential. And so he could homeschool them. It's not always perfect to have your parent homeschooling you, but it was for a short amount of time. And no, I think it was just, I'll say, sheer selfishness on my part that I wanted to go to the field, and I also didn't want to leave my kids. But I think, you'd have to ask them, but I'm always hopeful that it was a good experience for them. The researchers on the site were absolutely amazing and would ask, would you like to be my field assistant for the day? And so they would get to help with small mammal trapping or pollination, ecology, or water quality, or, all different kinds of things. And so my oldest is an archaeologist. And so I think that, they also have a love of science. So hopefully, and I think, Bryce does too. So I hope it was a good decision. But yeah, it was done out of selfishness.
You didn't mention anything about the work you did in Costa Rica. That's a whole another area. But of all the places you've been, what is the most What was the favorite? Do you have a favorite place?
I don't. And I thought about that. They're all really different. The people are really different. I don't have a favorite. I think that there are places that I would go back to more readily than others. And I may not say that with ones, but sometimes, you know, they're just a better fit for you.
Yeah,
I
sure.
loved Costa Rica and it's beautiful, but I will say that one of the nice things for me is working with Japanese people. I think that we work on the same timeline. We're both very good at communication. We have sometimes when you're working in certain countries where people are a little bit more lax or a little bit more type B, that's a little harder for me. And I try really, really hard to be easygoing, but I'm not.
So we have a question from our YouTube audience. So I want to bring in Susumu Tomiya here to read that out for us, Paula, and then that's all right, Susumu.
Sure. So the question is from Sophia. Is there a way to work in wildlife without a graduate degree?
Absolutely. And I'll just speak from, I'll just say my oldest, I mentioned that Abigail is an archaeologist. And right now, I mean, I will say in particular, I don't know about other countries, so I can only speak about the United States, and I'm sure it's the same in Canada. So many companies, anytime they want to build anything, they have to do environmental impact assessments. And so that's requiring, you don't have to have a graduate degree. That only requires like a bachelor's degree. So Abigail does cultural resource assessment, looking for any kind of culture that might be destroyed or damaged with a construction. And the same thing for biological assessment. But it does depend on what you want to do. If you want to work with primates, you absolutely can work at a primate sanctuary. There is a sanctuary that's about an hour and a half from south of me in San Antonio in southern Texas. And they're always looking for hardworking people who are compassionate and have an understanding about primates. I think they do require that you have a bachelor's degree, but there are those kind of opportunities that come up. So I don't think you need about an advanced degree or a graduate degree. I'm not sure why I felt compelled to get one, but I did. I love to learn, and I just, I wanted the opportunity.
Great. I think more and more too, I mean, as you mentioned, Paula, the opportunities because of development, because of industry, those opportunities seem to be increasing, if anything else. And so probably around the world. So I think there are definitely opportunities there. But, we at universities and as academics they're not always as visible to us. So it's great. I think for someone like you who's had such a diverse path so far in and out of the academy, it's nice to have your perspective on that. And I think it's wonderful to see how applied so much of your work has been as well, and how you've been able to kind of fit it into, you're even doing consulting later, but to fit it into making a real difference actually, and how things are done to kind of better the situation for people on the ground. We have a hand up here from Kasha.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I really, really enjoyed that. I had a really visceral reaction to when you were talking about having tasted the contaminated soil, and I just thought, I could imagine exactly what you thought in that moment. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was definitely got to me this morning. I have kind of an abstract question for you, because listening to your talk, it just really sounds like what I would consider to be kind of a dream career. You could forever grow and forever develop new skills and meet new people and go to new places. And if I had to pick one dream trajectory for my career, that would be it. However, I'm finding that as I get older and progress through my career, what's become challenging for me actually is there's a lot of skills and a lot of new technology that's coming out that could really help with the things that I want to do, that I'm interested in. But I feel like I'm starting to lack confidence. Like as you get older and you progress through your career, you kind of start to develop a bias for the things that you know that you're good at. And even if you're interested in learning new things, it's difficult to approach them with a headspace of confidence, you know, and really putting yourself out there to learn new skills, or it is for me anyway. So I want to know if you have any tips for students who are developing their careers. You mentioned, for example, GIS, get in there, learn about that. That's something I want to do, but I feel really, I don't feel confident in that area. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for how to keep approaching new skills, new places, new talents in your career with a sense of confidence.
I'm just going to say, you know, you just have to try. I mean, and I think that's why one of the reasons why I was saying it's really important as well to think carefully about who you collaborate with. And I was extremely lucky that Andrew was at PRI when I was there, because there were so many things that I did not know how to do. I came back as an older student, and I mean, my gosh, you know, art just makes my head want to explode. And I would sit with Andrew and he would, you know, explain something to me. And so sometimes, you know, you do have to find those people in your life. It's like, you know, hand on hand that kind of show you how to do things. And I find that most people are really willing to help you. You just have to have the courage to ask. And so, you know, I know that there are lots of free courses now. You can get on Coursera. And I remember taking, after the fact, I did take a Coursera class on R taught by some guy at Princeton University. And there's lots of classes that you can take. But I think you just have to decide, you know, what is it that you want to do, and just try. What I encourage you to do things that really interest you. Home range analyses I found incredibly tedious. And if you did one small thing wrong, you know, it didn't work. And I don't have that kind of brain. You know, I think like there's numbers people and there's letters people. And I'm like the Wordle girl and the spelling bee. I'm not, you know, Sudoku. So, you know, find out what it is that you really identify with, and just try. Just only try. You know, again, I still believe that I'm glad that I tried. And if I had failed, then at least I knew, you know, I gave it my best shot. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Good luck. And I want to say just real quickly. So, I ate lots of soil. Like I tried all the soil. I wanted to see how it felt in my mouth. And I had like my son, it was so funny because I had these like the camera traps up, and he had images of him like, you know, like going out and pretending he was eating soil, but really eating the soil. And then once I found out that it had parasites, like we went off to the doctor and he got the deworming and so all of these like sort of adventures in parenting while in the field, but it was a good time.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you. That's actually very encouraging advice. It makes me feel like I'm on the right track, because Andrew is actually my supervisor, and you better believe that I absolutely wanted to work in his lab because of his incredible technological skills. So step one accomplished.
Mathematics as well.
Yeah. Let's not get carried away here. But, you know, to reiterate something that Paula just said, for me, Paula's biggest supervisor when I knew her as a fellow grad student was just how incredible she is at reaching out to people. Yeah. So I think a lot of us get stuck in these things where and I'm a perfect example of this, where I feel almost, I don't want to reach out to people unless I have like as firm a grasp on what I am asking them about as possible. But the problem is that's a dead end because I'm never going to get to that stage. And I need that person to help me get over the hurdle. And so one of the things I learned, although I haven't been a good student since then from Paula, is just do it, because people are always interested to hear from folks who are struggling with things, and especially if they have a common interest and the ability to solve the problems for them. So yeah. Paula's superpowers really has been about that. And I think Paula once told me, not to embarrass you, Paula, but I think you once told me that you really restrict your Facebook friend list. And then when I became friends with you on Facebook, you had a list of over 800 people. And I was like, what are you talking about? Choose who you, that was already like three times as big as mine.
I tried, and then I feel guilty. Oh, gosh.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Best of luck to you, and you're in good hands.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks for the vote of confidence. Does anybody else in Zoom have any other questions or things you want to put in the chat? I do have a couple of others to keep us going, but I am sensitive also to your time, Paula, so we won't keep you for too much longer.
I've got a question about the ropes.
Go for it, Mike.
In India with Sindhu, Jyoti, you were talking. You showed a couple different ways, the sari walls. How well did that work?
That worked the best.
Yeah, really.
And that's we're publishing that data. It's just been so slow in coming out. But the jute rope, it was like hot knife on butter. They could have cared less about that. I think it can be kind of effective for a bigger animal like nilgai, which is kind of like a big cow. The sari fencing was the most effective. They only came over that fence twice.
Oh, wow.
And the green garden netting was also pretty effective. But I will say, at the very end of our study, it was so sad because it's like our corn was really doing pretty well, and then all of this stuff happened. And then within like 5 days before we harvested, the Hanuman langurs came in, and they're huge. Like when they get down, they can jump over anything. They just took all the corn, and I'm like, then that's when we broke out the local gun, and they did run away, but they came back the very next day, and we just said we need to harvest, otherwise we won't have anything at all. So it's really challenging, but I think that some simple fences can work. That the sari fences are from southern India, where that the women wear saris. In northern India, they do not, and it's not it's not as transferable of a strategy as we had kind of hoped it would be. But yeah. The jute rope, that's really tedious because you have to put the engine waste oil on it, and then you're putting the chili. You can mix them, but then anytime it rains, you have to reapply the chili powder, and it's just kind of a pain. But that didn't work anyway for monkeys. So
they're probably. I'm not quite sure on what the repellent action of it on rope space like that would be. They just hop through in the middle and go for the corn inside, which is probably more tasty. But that's interesting that idea came up to try that.
Yeah, it was the forest department. I mean, I think it's been used elsewhere, but we really tried everything we could think of.
I wanted to ask about that as well, because I feel like and the way you presented it just a moment ago was very systematic. So you had these different kind of categories of deterrence. So you talked about, so they could be like the taste or smell. So these chemical based ones, they could be psychological. You had drones and mirrors and things. I have a mirror question later too. But how do you kind of stay motivated to keep going through all of those things when so many of them are destined to fail and just around the world? I mean, it's such a challenging issue, and that kind of success is a little bit low and unlikely. So how do you kind of just carry that around?
Gosh, like the conservation of primates depends on it. We have to, like, failure is not an option. I mean, it's like, I'm attending this symposium next week in Japan, and I'm really buoyed by the fact that they're still, you know, having people come out, and we're brainstorming, and you need to come up with new ideas. You need to think creatively. You need to think outside the box. And even if something fails, then you can kind of re-examine, like, is there a way that I can repurpose that? I mean, and I actually think that ultrasonic devices could work, but you know, something needs to change, either the frequency range, the amplification, something. So I don't know. That's just kind of how I roll. I'm not easily discouraged. There are some things that, like, I have a really, really funny video when we did the bioacoustics. We had speakers, and first we tried gunshots, and you know, it was really loud, you know, and you know, and this rhesus macaque sort of stands up and kind of looks around, and then just goes back to eating. And then I'm like, we're just kind of laughing, and I'm like, and the you know, one of the students was like, "What happened?" And I'm like, "Nothing. Do it again." And so boom, you know, and then they just couldn't have cared less. So, you know, I just you have to have, like, a sense of humor about it all. And I think in a setting with urban primates, they're used to human noise. They're used to babies crying and cars backfiring and everything else, you know. So okay, so that doesn't work, you know, in an urban setting, but it doesn't mean it can't work elsewhere. So, you know, we just can't get stuck on that. Like, just because it doesn't work here doesn't mean it won't work anywhere. Yeah, but so I think we just really need to think a lot more creatively and kind of work together. More publishing needs to be done where people talk a lot about their failures. And so we're not reinventing the wheel, or, you know, very distinct, you know, information about what exactly you did, so other people could replicate it, or they know that they need to actually do something different than that.
Maybe when you come to Japan, you'll have a chance to see it. But a lot of local farmers are putting out pamphlets and things, or through local government. So it's way out of the hands of researchers, and the farmers are actually trying things and updating things and passing that information around. Maybe we could learn a lot from folks that are doing it every day as well.
Absolutely. The stakeholders are the ones that know, they know exactly. And so that's when I was talking about in South Africa, getting to work with, you know, just talking to the dairy farmer that lived next door, and just hearing everything he'd tried, and just, you know, they have so much information, and we really need to listen to them. They're the ones whose lives are affected the most by it. And I think that's just really critical. So, you know, I find it encouraging that they're the ones that are, you know, responsible and, you know, involved in the education and awareness. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Cool. So it looks like we don't have any other questions here for now. Maybe one final one for me is, did your monkeys pass the mirror test?
For self-recognition?
Yeah, the mirror test of self-recognition. What do you think about that?
I actually think they did, you know, like, I mean, I just think, what are we talking about? Like, did I put some dot on their forehead and they picked it off? But I mean, she obviously was looking at her backside to me. And so that is, so it's like that you want to see a part of your body, your own body, that you don't have access to. I think so. I mean, I had somebody else tell me, no, monkeys, you know, they don't pass the mirror test. It's like, well, how do you know? I mean, maybe it's how the experiment was designed. You know, we just always need to be thinking about from whose perspective and exactly how that study or that experiment is set up. But yeah, I'd love to try more mirrors again. And it may not work exactly as intended, but they definitely interacted with them. So yeah,
really interesting.
And they're not my monkeys.
Oh, thank you for I was being silly with my question, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. And I love those little things that happen that you're not expecting, and gives you a different kind of perspective on what you're doing. So,
yeah.
Well, I think we're probably all good. Paula, thanks so much for joining us and doing this for me. Now I've got me stuck in every single sentence I wanted to talk about myself. Thank you for coming and giving me this lecture, Paula. I really appreciate it. And I think so does the rest of our audience here.
Very much. Thank you.
And yeah, we'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and you'll be in Japan soon. So really excited to welcome you here. And I hope we can meet.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
There.
Thanks again
So,
for having me. And it was lovely to see you all. Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm going to
Take
stop
care.
the recording here, and we can stick around for another minute or two if you want.
Yeah.